we begin the process of education. The first level of education is always in the family. And then we go into social systems designed to provide education. And in our culture, we have all of this kind of language associated with education. And yeah, most of that is what's happening in our culture. There's a lot more to it than that. And our culture tends to think that education is about what can be learned from books. It's about math and science and literature, maybe a little bit of art, hopefully a lot more art in the future. And what are concepts? All of these are representative of concepts. We don't think of education as being the whole range of becoming an adult. We have separated out education into concepts. The whole rest of social training, socialization gets lost in the shuffle. And that's what we see a lot in the world of the inner city, etc. I'll expand this for a brief moment. Stop. So hit the wrong button there. There we go. So to give you the full screen on that so you can see some of it, it's a nice illustration of the concepts. This is not what the rest of the world sees education as. At the rest of the world, this is more of concepts. If you pour enough concepts into people's heads, they can do something with it. If you keep them sitting still for hours every day and pour concepts into their heads, then they will learn what they need. Other concepts of education, other ideas of education are a little more broad-based. We start to see that when we see the kindergarten blanket. This is far more like what would have happened in any culture at any time. And again, we've got a blending here of cultures, and which is kind of fun, blending here of races, where we've got a storyteller, someone sharing a story with very young children. This is the beginning of the social system structure outside of the family, the beyond family education process in virtually every culture, whether it's Western culture or anywhere else. The age varies a little bit depending on where we are in the world, but that the storytelling, story sharing is the first part. Now, again, in our culture, we think that's about certain kinds of stories and where they come from. We think that it comes from books and computers. It's not necessarily, grandma's life experience or grandpa's, happy journey fishing one year or aunt and uncle's camping trip or so-and-so's hunting stories. Those things don't get included in our education system because we think education is about concepts, and we provide systems and structures that support that. So we need to recognize that education is a lot more than that. Something like this. These are all in Africa. This is about, 15 months old, 18 months old, certainly under 2. Learning to use the bow just like Daddy does. Okay, here we have 6, 7-year-olds learning to play it's a game that's common in Africa, but it's a counting game, it's a spatial recognition game. Notice that it's using their bodies in good ways that are important for their own flexibility. It's getting them in touch with making things happen. These are holes in the dirt that they've made happen so that they can play this shell game. Here's another form of education in any third world, any indigenous culture. The girls have something in common in what they're wearing, which means that tells me there's an empire person running the show because they would not be looking quite so alike in a normal indigenous culture, but they do. And they're clapping and singing and dancing and learning. Can you see? They're following each other. They're not following someone outside themselves. And this is a very important function and a way of thinking about education in third world, indigenous, insufficient cultures. In a not sustainable culture, we have, this is our variation on it. We give them the toy and then they figure out how to use it, and that's cool. At least they're figuring it out. We don't, we don't have an adult and they're telling them how to make it happen, which is part of what empire culture would be normally doing. Here's some more kids figuring things out. I happen to like those pictures a lot. This is the first time these people have ever experienced snow. They've been cold before, you can tell they got the appropriate clothing, but they've never ever had snow. So these kids are not just, these could be the adults, whatever age, learning what snow is. All right. More education, other cultures. We invented chess. Chess is definitely the empire culture, but we got kids learning together. And this is much more of a sustainable way of learning. Again, this is what the way a sustainable culture functions. As soon as the kid is big enough, he's in that boat. He's making it happen. And this is a Western person being escorted home, escorted to the community by the kids, because they are certainly capable of doing that. So that realization that very young people who we would consider still children are definitely accessible and capable of doing things is part of the third world, part of the indigenous, part of the alternative way of thinking that needs to be brought back in if we're going to have social systems that work. And the idea that different age groups can be working together to learn something and teaching each other that is prevalent in the chessboard scene above. Doesn't matter what the thing is, whether it's chess or something else. This process of mutually supportive learning is a huge part of the educational system in a sustainable culture. So, very different way of thinking about education. It's including every aspect of life, not just concepts. It's including a variety of activities and using the body in different ways, not just sitting in a chair. It's involving different age groups to some extent in mutual support, and it assumes that young people are capable of doing things that we've said only adults can do. Another quality of indigenous and sustainable education is the concept of the cohort. This is a set of girls getting ready for their initiation into menses. And they're being told you're about to become women. And this is while you're getting ready for that process. The cohort is a mutually supportive group. Now, we've begun to introduce cohorts into higher education, maybe 20 years now, I think. But we haven't really thought about it for youth. We haven't thought about the fact that a group of girls is going through this whole thing. We've done it, but we haven't thought about it. We haven't made it a carefully thought about consideration in the educational process. The fact that a bunch of 13-year-old girls are teaching each other is ignored rather than worked with in our culture. And then we get the ultimate education. Isaac Asimov, who, by the way, is Russian, and this scene is in Russia. He grew up in this country, but he is first-generation American. He says self-education is, I firmly believe, the only kind of education there is. In any idea of education, we have to realize that what we are doing is facilitating the individual developmental process. We are not pouring information into a mind. We're facilitating learning.